I was just serving the second course when Patricia Miller, my daughter-in-law, slammed her fist on the table. She screamed at me in front of everyone. "You either obey me or you get out, old woman!" The silence that fell over the dining room was so heavy I could feel its weight on my shoulders. My son Michael just stared at his plate. He didn't have the courage to defend me. My grandchildren stopped eating and lowered their heads, ashamed. There I was. Grace Morgan, 68 years old, being humiliated in my own home. At the Sunday dinner, I worked so hard to prepare. Patricia continued, "I am sick of you acting like you own this place. I'm the one in charge here." My heart pounded, but something strange happened. Instead of shrinking like I always did, I felt an icy calm wash over me. For 45 years, I built this house brick by brick. I worked as a seamstress to support Michael after my husband Frank died. Every piece of furniture, every curtain, every plate on that table was earned with my own sweat. Patricia arrived 3 years ago when she married my son, and little by little she took over, reorganizing my kitchen, changing the decor, treating me like a maid in my own home. She complained about my cooking, the way I cleaned, the noise I made in the morning. Michael always took her side. "Mom, Patricia is right. You need to adapt." But that Sunday, when she humiliated me in front of the whole family, I realized I hadn't just lost my house. I had lost my place in the world. I stood up from the table, slowly took off my apron, and placed it on the chair. "Excuse me," I said in a voice I didn't even recognize. I went up to my room, the only place that was still mine, and locked the door. I sat on the bed where Frank and I had dreamed so many dreams, where I raised Michael all by myself, where I cried all my tears of widowhood. Through the bottom of the door, I could hear the conversation continuing as if nothing had happened, as if the owner of the house hadn't just been kicked out of her own dinner. Patricia was laughing loudly, completely in command. It was in that moment that I opened the drawer of my nightstand and took out a folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were all the house documents, the will Frank left, the deed, the paid receipts, everything in my name, everything rightfully mine. But what they didn't know was that everything was about to change. The story really began 3 years ago when Patricia entered our lives like a hurricane in a wedding dress. Michael met her at work. She was his boss's secretary, and he fell for her like a teenager. I was happy at first. I thought it was time for my son to find love after being alone for so long. Patricia was pretty young, 20 years younger than Michael, with a smile that seemed sincere and sweet words that won us all over. While they were dating, she would come over on Sundays. She would help me in the kitchen. She called me Mrs. Morgan with respect. She praised my cooking. She seemed interested in our family stories. The wedding day was the happiest day I'd had in a long time. I saw Michael beaming elegant in his suit, dancing with Patricia like he was the luckiest man in the world. She wore the wedding dress we had picked out together. She looked beautiful. And when she hugged me after the ceremony, she said, "Thank you for giving me such a wonderful son, Mrs. Morgan. I promise to take care of him and make him happy." I cried with emotion, thinking I was finally getting a daughter, that the house would be full of life again, that maybe soon there would be grandchildren running down the halls. The first few months were like a honeymoon for everyone. Patricia moved into the house with her few belongings. She came from a humble family, from a small town in the Midwest, and she seemed grateful for everything. She helped me with the chores we cooked together. We watched our soap operas in the afternoon while we embroidered. Michael would come home from work and find us chatting and laughing in the kitchen. "I'm so lucky," he'd say. "My 2 favorite women get along so well." Patricia would kiss him, serve him dinner, and spoil him like a king. I thought I had found the perfect daughter-in-law, that God had blessed our family. But things started to change subtly. First, it was small comments, almost unnoticeable. "Mrs. Morgan, don't you think this living room would look more modern with new furniture? Don't you think the kitchen needs remodeling? Michael works so hard he deserves to come home to a more contemporary house." At first, I thought she just wanted to contribute to make improvements. After all, it was natural for a young woman to want to put her personal touch on the house where she was going to live. I accepted her suggestions warmly, thinking it was nice that she felt at home. The first real sign of trouble came when Patricia started reorganizing the kitchen without asking me. One day I came downstairs in the morning and found all my dishes in boxes, my spices stored in different places, my family recipes shoved in a corner. "I'm just organizing things better," she told me with a smile that no longer reached her eyes. "This will be more efficient for cooking." When I asked her where she put my mortar and pestle, the one my mother gave me when I got married, she said she put it away because it looked too old and ugly in the new kitchen she was creating. Michael supported all her changes. When I tried to talk to him about the modifications Patricia was making without consulting me, he would say, "Mom, just let Patricia fix the house how she likes. She's going to be the one spending the most time here when we have kids." His words hurt me deeply, but I swallowed them in silence. I didn't want to be the problematic mother-in-law everyone complains about. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted his marriage to work. So I started to keep quiet, to accept to give up spaces that had been mine for decades. Patricia's transformation from a loving daughter-in-law to a controlling woman was gradual, but relentless. She began to speak to me differently when Michael wasn't around. Her voice became colder, more demanding. "Mrs. Morgan, I didn't like how yesterday's dinner turned out," she'd say. "The beans had too much salt and the rice was dry. You need to pay more attention when you cook." I, who had been cooking for 50 years, who had fed Frank and Michael with love and dedication, was suddenly receiving constant criticism for something I had always done well. When the first grandchildren arrived, 2 beautiful little ones who became the light of my life, I thought things would get better. Patricia would need my help with the babies. She would value my experience as a mother. Maybe she would treat me kindly again. But it was the exact opposite. Patricia became even more territorial, more jealous of my relationship with the children. "Don't give them sweets without asking me," she would order. "Don't hold them so much you'll spoil them. When you read them stories, do it quietly. I don't want them getting used to the way you talk." Every interaction with my own grandchildren had to be supervised, approved, and controlled by her. The final straw was when Patricia decided that my room, the master bedroom where Frank and I had slept for 20 years of marriage, should be theirs. "It's only logical," she told Michael. "We are the young couple. We need the bigger room for us and the kids." I protested meekly. I explained that the room had special meaning to me, that all my memories with his father were in there. Michael looked at me impatiently and said, "Mom, stop being so attached to material things. A room is just a room." That night, I moved into the small back room, carrying my few belongings like a refugee in my own home. Patricia began treating me like her personal employee. She woke me up early to make her breakfast exactly how she liked it. Scrambled eggs, not too dry, coffee with little sugar toast that was golden but not burnt. If anything wasn't perfect, she scolded me like a child. "You can't even do something this simple correctly, Grace." I had to wash her clothes a special way, iron Michael's shirts a certain way, clean the house following her new rules. The woman who had worked her whole life to build that house now had to ask permission to use her own kitchen. On Sundays, when the rest of the family came over, my sisters, my brothers-in-law, my nephews, Patricia played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. She smiled, served coffee, spoke sweetly about how much she loved and respected me. "Grace is such a blessing in our lives," she'd say with a fake smile. "I don't know what we'd do without her." But as soon as the guests left, she would go back to being the cold, authoritarian woman I knew. Once my sister Dolores asked me in private if everything was okay because she noticed I'd been very quiet lately. I didn't have the courage to tell her the truth. How could I explain that I had become a stranger in my own home? Michael changed completely after getting married. The loving son who used to hug me every morning before work, who told me his problems, who asked for my advice, he disappeared. Patricia became his only confidant, his only priority. When I tried to talk to him about something, he'd answer distractedly, in a hurry to end the conversation and get back to his wife. "I can't right now, Mom. Patricia needs me." That was his constant answer. The nights we used to spend talking in the living room watching TV together were over. Now they locked themselves in their room, and I was left alone in the living room, feeling the house grow colder and emptier every day. The humiliation on Sunday was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of 3 years of systematic degradation. Patricia had established her dominance over the house, over Michael, over the grandchildren, and the only thing left was to establish it over me definitively. For weeks, she'd been pushing for the Sunday dinner to be done her way with her menu, her rules, her total control. That Sunday, she came prepared for the final confrontation. She had invited her parents, her siblings, so they could witness her victory over the old mother-in-law who still dared to act like the owner of the house. When she yelled at me in front of everyone, when she ordered me to obey her or leave, Patricia wasn't just humiliating me. She was symbolically kicking me out of my place in the family. It was her way of saying that the era of Grace Morgan was over. That now she was the matriarch, the one in charge, the one who decided who belonged in the family and who didn't. Michael, by staying silent, by not defending me, confirmed his choice. He had chosen his wife over the mother who had raised him alone, who had sacrificed her youth and her dreams to give him a better life. That night, locked in my small room, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman I saw. Where was the Grace who had worked 2 shifts to pay for Michael's education? Where was the woman who had faced her husband's death alone and raised her son? When had I become this scared, submissive woman who accepted humiliation in silence? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was no longer going to be the victim of my own kindness. I would no longer allow myself to be treated like trash in the house that I built. Patricia wanted a war, and she was going to get one. The next day, my silent transformation would begin. But that night, for the first time in 3 years, I slept in peace. Because when you hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go. Up. On Monday, Patricia woke me at 6 a.m, banging on the door. "Grace, the coffee is late. Michael needs to leave early." I went down to the kitchen like a zombie. I made the coffee set, the table, washed the dishes from the dinner that nobody else bothered to clean. Patricia stood watching me, criticizing every move. "That's not how you cut the bread roll. That cup is poorly washed. You're too slow." Michael drank his coffee in silence, avoiding my gaze. When he left for work, Patricia turned to me with a cruel smile. "Now that I've established the rules, I expect everything to run perfectly. This house needs a real owner." I kept washing the dishes, but my hands were shaking with suppressed rage. How had I reached this point? How had I become a stranger in my own home? I remembered when Michael was little, and he'd hug me saying, "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you forever." I remembered the nights he was sick, and I spent entire nights by his bed. I remembered working 2 shifts at the sewing factory to pay for his schooling, how I sold my jewelry to buy his university textbooks, how I saved every penny so he could have a better life than me. When Frank died, I promised him I would take care of our son, and I did. I gave up my dreams, my plans, my future. I never dated again. I never traveled. I never thought about myself again. Everything for Michael. And now, he was married to a woman who treated me like garbage, and he allowed it. Patricia only loved him for the house, for the comfort, for the stability that I built. She didn't even know that Michael cried in secret when his father died. She didn't know about the nights he had nightmares and came to sleep with me. In the afternoon, while I was hanging laundry in the yard, I heard Patricia talking on the phone with a friend. I finally convinced my husband to put his mother in her place. The old woman thought she owned the house, but now she knows who's boss here. Soon I'm going to convince Michael to put her in a nursing home. Then I'll finally have my house in peace. My legs buckled. A nursing home. After everything I did, after all the sacrifices, she wanted to lock me away. And the worst part, she was convincing my own son to do it, too. I let the clothes fall to the ground and went inside. I went up to my room and locked myself in. I picked up a photo of Michael as a child, back when he looked at me like I was the most important person in the world. That little boy was dead. In his place grew a weak, manipulated man who chose a woman over the mother who gave her life for him. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake remembering every moment of my life with Michael, every sacrifice I had made, every dream I had abandoned for him. I remembered when he was a baby and got pneumonia, how I spent 3 nights without sleep watching over him in the hospital, praying to God not to take him from me. I remembered his first steps in this very house, his first words. "Mama" was the first. His first day of school when he cried because he didn't want to leave me. I remembered the afternoons doing homework together at the kitchen table. The nights reading him stories before bed. The Sundays going to church together and then getting ice cream in the park. I remembered when he turned 15 and I threw him a surprise party with all his school friends. I worked weeks of overtime to save the money. I decorated the house with balloons and streamers. I made his favorite chocolate cake. Michael was so happy that night. He hugged me in front of all his friends and said, "My mom is the best in the world." His friends applauded, and I felt like the proudest woman in the state. That boy who looked at me with admiration, who trusted me completely, who needed me. Where had he gone? I remembered his high school graduation when he went on stage to get his diploma and looked for me in the crowd to smile. I was in the front row wearing my prettiest dress, the blue one Frank had given me before he died, crying with pride. Michael had been the valedictorian of his class. He had won a scholarship to the university. He had a bright future ahead of him. After the ceremony, he hugged me and said, "Thanks, Mom. Everything I am, I owe to you." That night, we ate at the fanciest restaurant in town, just him and me, celebrating his achievement and planning his future. We talked about his dreams of being an engineer, of building beautiful buildings, of having his own family someday. College was hard for both of us. Michael studied civil engineering in Chicago. He had to travel 3 hours a day or stay at my sister's house during the week. I worked day and night to pay his expenses, the tuition, the books, the transportation, the food. I sold everything I had of value. The gold earrings Frank gave me when Michael was born, my wedding ring, even my parents' antique wardrobe. But it was worth it. Every semester Michael passed, every class he completed, every step toward his degree was a shared victory. The weekends he came home, he told me everything. His professors, his classmates, the projects he was working on. We were a team, him and me, against the world. When he graduated as an engineer, it was the happiest day of my life since his birth. I traveled to Chicago for the ceremony. I wore my prettiest shawl, the silk one I inherited from my grandmother. Michael looked so handsome in his cap and gown, so mature, so professional. When they called his name to the stage to receive his degree, I screamed with excitement like a crazy person. People looked at me funny, but I didn't care. That was my son, my pride, my whole life receiving the recognition he deserved for so much effort. After the ceremony, we went to eat, and Michael gave me a silver bracelet with a small engraved plate that said, "For the best mom in the world, thanks for believing in me." The first few years after his graduation were beautiful. Michael got a job at an important construction firm. He earned good money. He helped with the house expenses. On Sundays, we went to the market together, bought ingredients to make his favorite dishes. We cooked together while he told me about his work projects. In the afternoons, we sat on the patio drinking coffee and watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Michael bought me little gifts, perfume, a pretty blouse, flowers for the mantel. He told me that when he got married, his wife would have to understand that his mom would always be the most important thing in his life. When he met Patricia, at first I thought she was perfect for him. She was pretty polite, seemed to love him very much. The first few months they dated, Patricia came to the house often. She helped me in the kitchen. She was interested in the family stories. She treated Michael with so much affection that it made me happy to see them together. One time she told me, "Mrs. Morgan, I want to ask your permission to love your son. I promise I will never try to separate you. You will always be the most important thing to him." I was so moved that I hugged her, crying. Finally, Michael had found a woman who understood how special our relationship was. But now, 3 years later, that sweet woman had turned out to be a mask. The real Patricia was calculating, manipulative, and jealous of anyone who had influence over Michael. She had studied our routines, our habits, our traditions, not to respect them, but to systematically destroy them. Every change she had made in the house was a way of erasing my presence, of eliminating the memories Michael and I had built together. My mother's mortar and pestle hidden because it looked ugly. The family photos replaced with modern decorations. My grandmother's chili recipe stored in a box because nobody eats that greasy stuff anymore. On Tuesday morning, Patricia woke me up even earlier. Grace, my parents are coming for lunch today. I want you to make red chili white rice pinto beans and fresh tortillas. And I want the house to be spotless. I asked if Michael knew about the visit, and she answered curtly, Michael doesn't need to know everything that happens in his house. I can make decisions without consulting him. I spent the entire morning cooking and cleaning as if I were the housemaid. When Patricia's parents arrived, humble people but with an air of arrogance since their daughter had married well, they treated me exactly as she had taught them, with condescension disguised as courtesy. "You sure can cook, ma'am," Patricia's mother said while devouring my chili. "Patricia is so lucky to have someone to help her with the house chores." Patricia's father, a short, mustached man who worked as a plumber, walked around my house as if he owned it, criticizing the furniture, suggesting improvements, talking about how outdated everything looked. "Look, Patricia," he said to his daughter, "you should convince Michael to modernize this living room. With the good salary he earns, you guys can afford those luxuries." I served the food, cleared the plates, washed the dishes while they planned changes to my home as if I were invisible. After lunch, I heard Patricia talking to her mom in the living room. "I've almost convinced Michael to look for a nursing home for his mother. The poor thing is very old. She needs special care that we can't give her here. Besides, with the kids growing, we need more space." Her mother replied, "Oh, honey, you're so considerate. Old people sometimes don't understand that they're in the way. It's better for everyone if she's in a place where they can care for her professionally." My hands trembled as I dried the dishes. Not only did Patricia want to get rid of me, but she already had her family's support to do it. And the most painful part was that they spoke about me as if I were an annoying object that needed to be disposed of. That afternoon, when Michael got home from work, Patricia had already told him her version of the family visit. "Honey, my parents came for lunch and they loved the house. My mom says you have great taste in decorating." Michael looked happy to have made a good impression on his in-laws. Patricia continued, "By the way, my mom gave me the name of a very good assisted living facility for seniors. She says your mom would be better off there with people her age with special activities for the elderly." Michael nodded distractedly while changing his clothes. "Yeah, honey, we could look into it. My mom is getting older. Maybe she needs more care than we can give her here." I listened to them from my room, where I had taken refuge after cleaning the whole house. My own son, talking about me as if I were a burden, as if I were a problem to be solved. He hadn't asked my opinion. He hadn't considered my feelings. He hadn't thought for 1 second about everything I had sacrificed for him. To Michael, I was already just an annoying old woman taking up space in his house, the house that I had paid for, the house where I had raised him, the house where I had buried my dreams to build his. That night, I didn't come down for dinner. Patricia came up to get me. "Grace, dinner is ready." I told her I wasn't hungry. "Are you sick? Do you need me to call the doctor?" Her fake concern disgusted me. "I'm fine, just tired." Patricia stood in the doorway for a few seconds as if studying me. "Well, if you need anything," she said. But in her eyes, I saw something different. Satisfaction. She was happy to see me weak, broken, defeated. Every tear of mine was a victory for her. Wednesday dawned gray and rainy, just like my mood. I stayed in bed late listening to Patricia complaining downstairs that breakfast wasn't ready. "Michael, your mom is acting very strange. She didn't eat dinner yesterday. Today she didn't want to get up. Don't you think we should take her to the doctor?" Michael came up to see me. He knocked on my door gently. "Mom, are you okay? Patricia says you haven't eaten." I pretended to be asleep. I didn't want to talk to the stranger my son had become. He stood there for a few minutes, then he went downstairs. I heard them talking in the kitchen. "She's sleeping. Maybe she just needs rest," Patricia replied. "Or maybe she's starting with dementia." My grandmother started just like that, losing the desire to do normal things. Dementia. Now they didn't just want to get rid of me for being annoying. They were inventing diseases to justify it. Patricia was smarter than I thought. She wasn't just taking my place in the family. She was building a narrative where she was the long-suffering hero, caring for a sick mother-in-law, and Michael was the grieving son who had no choice but to put his mother in a home for her own good. It was a perfect strategy. They would look like the good guys while sending me away to die alone in a facility. In the afternoon, when they were at work and school, I went down to the kitchen. The house was silent. The only sound was the ticking of the clock that Frank had given me on our 5th anniversary. I poured myself a coffee and sat at the table where I had eaten breakfast with Michael so many times when he was a child. I remembered the mornings packing his lunch for school, arranging his favorite bean and cheese sandwich, his juice box, a small apple. I remembered how he always said goodbye with a kiss and an "I love you, Mommy," before running off to the school bus. At this table, we had celebrated his birthdays, his good grades, his small victories. At this table, we had cried together when Frank died, holding each other, promising we would always have each other. At this table, we had planned his future, his studies, his dreams. Now this same table was the witness to my daily humiliation. The place where Patricia gave me orders like a servant, where Michael ate in silence, avoiding my eyes. I got up and walked through the house that had been my world for 45 years. In the living room was the armchair where Frank used to sit and read the newspaper in the afternoons, where Michael did his homework while I cooked, where we had watched thousands of soap operas and TV shows together. In the dining room was the table where we had hosted family and friends, where we had celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where last Sunday Patricia had humiliated me in front of everyone. In my old bedroom now, Patricia's was the bed where Frank and I had loved, where Michael had been born, where I had spent the best nights of my life. Every corner of this house held my soul, my history, my life. Every wall had witnessed my joys and my sorrows, my dreams and my nightmares. How could Michael even consider taking me out of here? How could Patricia pretend that I was the intruder when she had only arrived 3 years ago? But I understood something painful. To them, I was already part of the past, an obstacle to the future they wanted to build together. My history, my sacrifice, my love, none of it mattered anymore. That night, when Michael got home from work, I noticed he avoided me more than ever. He didn't come up to say hello like he used to. He didn't ask about my day. He showed no interest in how I was feeling. Patricia had successfully convinced him that I was a problem, a burden, an annoying responsibility that needed to be dealt with. My own son, the person I had lived for 50 years, now saw me just as Patricia wanted him to see me, as a burdensome old woman who refused to understand that her time was over. But they didn't know that the woman they thought was defeated was just beginning to wake up. The next day I would start to move in silence. But that night, I made the most important decision of my life. I was no longer going to be a victim of my own kindness. Patricia wanted to play dirty. Well, she was about to meet a woman who had survived much more than a spoiled daughter-in-law. On Thursday morning, I didn't go down to make coffee. I stayed in my room listening to Patricia yelling from downstairs, "Grace? Grace? Where is that woman?" I heard Michael trying to calm her down. "Leave her, honey. She must still be upset about the other day." Patricia snapped back. "Upset about nothing. She's throwing a tantrum. I'm going to go up there and—" But she didn't come up. Something about my absence made her hesitate. I remained in silence, organizing documents, doing calculations, planning. For the first time in 3 years, the house operated without me. Michael left for work without breakfast. Patricia had to fend for herself. And I discovered something interesting. They needed me far more than I needed them. The house was mine, the name on the deed was mine, and I had rights they couldn't even imagine. When Michael returned from work, he came up to see me. He knocked on the door and said, "Mom, we need to talk." I didn't answer. He insisted, "Please, Mom, open the door." I continued in silence. On Friday, I left the house early for the first time in years. I went to the county recorder's office, the bank, and the office of Mr. Salvador Mendoza, an old family lawyer. Mr. Mendoza listened to me tell him everything from the humiliation on Sunday to Patricia's plans to put me in a nursing home. He shook his head, outraged. "Mrs. Morgan, you have every right to that house. Your son and daughter-in-law are living there out of your kindness, not because they are entitled." I explained that I wanted to make a radical decision, but I needed to be sure I was acting within the law. Mr. Mendoza smiled. "Of course you can. It's your house, your life, your decision." I left his office with important papers in my purse and a feeling of power I hadn't felt in decades. I stopped by the bank, arranged some transfers, made important calls. No one at home knew where I was. Patricia called several times, worried. I didn't answer. When I got home late in the afternoon, Michael and Patricia were waiting for me in the living room, clearly nervous. "Mom, where were you?" "We were worried," Michael said. Patricia added, trying to sound caring. "Yes, Mother, it's not safe for someone your age to be wandering around alone." I looked at them both and smiled. A calm, serene smile that made them even more nervous. "I was taking care of some business," I replied. "Important business." I went up to my room and they stayed downstairs whispering. That night I heard Patricia pressuring Michael. "She's planning something. You need to do something." But I had already done my part. On Saturday morning, I went down to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, set the table, acted normally. Patricia was suspicious, but she relaxed a little. Michael left for work relieved, thinking I had gone back to normal. What a mistake. When they left, I picked up the phone and made the most important call of my life. And when they returned home, only a letter remained. During those days of silence, I had remembered something Frank told me shortly before he died. "Grace, in this life, people are going to try and take advantage of your good heart. Don't let them make you a victim of your own kindness. You are stronger than you think. You just need to remember it." I didn't fully understand his words then. But now, 40 years later, they finally made sense. I had spent my entire life being the woman who sacrifices, who adapts, who yields, who forgives. But not anymore. Patricia had awakened a woman she didn't know. A woman capable of making hard decisions to protect her dignity. The process of my transformation had begun on Monday when I decided not to get up early to serve them. For the first time in 3 years, Patricia had to make her own coffee, prepare Michael's breakfast, and set the table. I heard her cursing in the kitchen, burning the eggs, spilling the coffee. Michael left late for work because no one had packed his lunch. That small act of rebellion had caused chaos in their perfectly organized routines. I realized that my submission was what kept their comfortable world running. Without me, they were two spoiled adults who didn't know how to take care of themselves. On Tuesday, when Patricia yelled my name demanding I come down, I stayed in my room reading the Bible Frank had given me. I found a verse that spoke directly to my heart. "It is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife." Although it spoke of difficult women, I thought it also applied to my situation. Better to live alone with dignity than in a big house being humiliated. That afternoon, I heard Patricia talking to her mother on the phone. "The old woman is acting very strange. She doesn't want to do anything. She just stays locked in her room all day. I think it's time to call the nursing home." Her words confirmed my suspicions were correct. She had been planning to get rid of me for a long time. Wednesday was when I decided to act. While they were at work, I went down to the study where Frank kept his important documents. I hadn't been in there for years. Patricia had turned it into a playroom for the children. But in the back closet behind toys and children's books, I found the safe that Frank had installed years ago. Inside were all the house deeds, the will, the insurance policies, the payment receipts. Everything was in my name. Frank had been very careful to protect me legally. He knew that one day I might be alone and vulnerable. As I reviewed the documents, I found something I had completely forgotten. A second property. A small apartment downtown that Frank had bought as an investment shortly before he died. All these years it had been rented out and the money was automatically deposited into a bank account I never checked. With the accumulated rent and interest, there was a considerable amount of money that Patricia and Michael knew nothing about. Frank had left me more protected than I ever imagined. That afternoon I called Mr. Mason, the lawyer, to consult him about my rights and options. "Mrs. Morgan," he told me, "you are the sole owner of that house. Your son has no legal right to the property. You can do whatever you want with it, sell it, rent it, or simply kick out the current occupants." I asked him about the legal process to get my house back. "It's very simple," he explained. "Since it's your property and they don't pay rent or have a contract, you can give them a notice to vacate. If they refuse, we can start an eviction process." His words gave me the strength I needed to make the final decision. On Thursday morning, when I didn't come down to make coffee, Patricia came up to my door, furious. "Grace, enough with these tantrums. Come down immediately and do your job." Your job. That's how she saw me, as her personal employee. I yelled from inside, "I don't work for you anymore, Mrs. Miller." She was silent for a few seconds, surprised by my response. Then she started pounding on the door. "Open this door immediately. I am the one in charge of this house." But I didn't open it. For the first time in 3 years, I had said no to Patricia Miller, and it felt liberating. When Michael returned from work that Thursday, Patricia had already told him her version of events. "Your mother is going crazy, Michael. She yelled at me, she disrespected me, she refuses to do her duties in the house. I think it's urgent we call the nursing home." Michael came up to talk to me, knocking gently on the door. "Mom, can we talk? Patricia tells me you yelled at her." I answered from inside. "Tell your wife I am not her servant anymore, and also tell her that this is my house, not hers." Michael was shocked by my firm tone. "Mom, I don't understand what's wrong with you. Why are you acting like this?" I explained. "I am acting like the owner of this house, something you all seem to have forgotten." On Friday, when I left early without telling anyone, Patricia panicked. She followed me to the door, yelling, "You can't just leave like this. It's dangerous. Come back immediately." But I kept walking without looking back. It was the first time in years I had gone out alone without asking permission, without giving explanations. I felt like a free woman at Mr. Mason's office. I signed all the necessary papers to regain total control of my property. I also updated my will, removing Michael as the primary beneficiary and leaving very specific instructions about what would happen to my assets. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Michael and Patricia waiting for me in the living room as if they were the homeowners receiving a problematic guest. "Mom, we need to talk." "Seriously," Michael said in a tone I didn't like. "Patricia and I have been talking, and we think you need professional help. Your behavior these last few days isn't normal." Patricia added with fake concern, "Mrs. Morgan, we understand that age brings changes, but you can't keep acting so strangely. We have children in the house. We need stability." I looked at both of them and smiled. Their veiled threats didn't scare me anymore. "The only strange thing here," I told them, "is that you two believe you can make decisions about my life in my house." That night, I heard Patricia on the phone with someone probably researching nursing homes. "Yes, it's urgent. The woman is 68. She's showing signs of dementia, aggressive behavior, disobedience. Do you have a bed available?" Her words confirmed she already had it all planned. She didn't just want to kick me out of my house. She was going to use the excuse of mental illness to do it. She was smarter and crueler than I had thought. But two could play that game, and I had cards she didn't even know existed. On Saturday, I acted as if I had returned to normal to throw them off. I made breakfast. I cleaned the house. I acted like the submissive mother-in-law I had always been. Patricia relaxed, thinking she had won the psychological battle. Michael went to work relieved, believing my nervous breakdown was over. But while they thought I had gone back to being the victim, I was executing the most important plan of my life. When they left, I made the calls that would change everything forever. First, I called Mr. Mason. "Mr. Mason, I want to proceed with what we discussed. Prepare the eviction papers." Next, I called a moving company. "I need you to come pick up my belongings at this address tomorrow Sunday at 12 noon. Then I called my sister, Dolores. "Sister, can I stay with you for a few days while I get my new place ready?" I also called the bank to transfer money to my personal account. Money I was going to need for my new independent life. The hardest call was to a real estate agency. "I want to put a house up for sale." "Yes, it's urgent. The current occupants need to be out in 30 days. The agent explained that in the current market, a house like mine would sell quickly. "Are you sure about this decision, ma'am? Once you sign the sales contract, there's no turning back." I assured him I had never been more sure of anything in my life. That house had stopped being my home the day they allowed Patricia to humiliate me in it. Now it was just a property I needed to get rid of. After making all the calls, I sat in my small room and wrote the letter I would leave on the table. I wrote every word carefully, thinking about the impact it would have when they read it. "Michael and Patricia, I have moved out permanently. The house is officially for sale. The real estate agent, Richard Vargas, will be in contact with you. You have 30 days to find another place to live. With respect, but without affection. Grace Morgan." I reread the letter several times, making sure the tone was firm but legal. Clear but final. That night, I slept better than I had in months. For the first time in 3 years, I was going to sleep knowing that the next day, I would no longer be anyone's victim. The next day, my new life would begin. Far from the humiliation, far from the manipulation, far from those who had mistaken my kindness for weakness. Patricia had awakened the wrong woman. She had awakened the widow who survived alone, the mother who sacrificed everything for her son, the woman who built a house with her own hands. And that woman was not going to let anyone trample on her ever again. Sunday dawned sunny, as if the sky itself was celebrating my liberation. I got up early, packed my few important belongings, the photos of Frank, some jewelry, my favorite clothes, and waited for the moving company to arrive. At 12 o'clock sharp, just as I had planned, they knocked on the door. Michael and Patricia were at church with the kids, so the house was empty. In 1 hour, the movers took out everything I wanted to take. The rest, the furniture, the appliances, everything else would stay with the house to make the sale easier. Before I left, I placed the letter on the dining room table in the exact spot where Patricia had humiliated me the previous Sunday. It was symbolic. Where my humiliation had begun, my liberation now began. I closed the door of the house where I had lived for 45 years, where I had been happy with Frank, where I had raised Michael, where I had suffered for the last 3 years. As I closed it, I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. That house was no longer my home. My home would be wherever I was respected and valued. When Michael and Patricia returned from church and found the letter, their perfect world collapsed in seconds. Patricia screamed like a maniac. "She can't do this. This house is ours too." Michael stood there pale, rereading the letter over and over, as if the words might change. They called my cell phone dozens of times. I didn't answer a single one. Let them find out for themselves that yes, I could do all of that and much more. The war that Patricia had started with her humiliation last Sunday had just ended with my victory this Sunday. The old Grace, who let herself be mistreated, had died that Sunday morning. The woman who was reborn was someone completely different. Free, dignified, and finally the owner of her own destiny. The letter was on the dining room table in the same place where Patricia had humiliated me the Sunday before. "Michael and Patricia, I have moved out permanently. The house is officially for sale. The real estate agent, Richard Vargas, will be in contact with you. You have 30 days to find another place to live. Grace Morgan." When they arrived and read it, Patricia screamed, "She can't do this! This house is ours too!" Michael just stood there, pale, rereading the letter. They called my cell phone dozens of times. I didn't answer. Let them find out on their own that yes, I could do it. The house was in my name. I was the sole owner, and I had the legal right to sell it whenever I wanted. On Monday, the agent Richard Vargas arrived with an interested family. Patricia tried to block the visit, but Mr. Mason arrived with a court order. "Mrs. Grace Morgan is the sole proprietor of this property. Any interference in the sale will constitute a crime." Michael came to my new apartment. It was small, but it was mine. The following Tuesday, he was thin with dark circles under his eyes, clearly distraught. "Mom, please let's talk. You can't sell our house." I looked at him calmly and said, "It's not our house, Michael. It never was. It is my house. I built it, I paid for it, I maintained it. You were my guests." He tried to argue. "But Mom, I'm your son. I have rights." I smiled sadly. A son who lets his wife humiliate his mother in front of the family has no rights. A son who plans to put his mother in a nursing home has lost the right to call himself a son. Michael was stunned. "How did you know?" I explained that I had heard everything that I knew about their plans. "Patricia married you for the house, Michael, and you chose her over me. Now live with the consequences." The house sold in 15 days to a young family with small children. Michael and Patricia had to move into a rented apartment on the other side of town, far from everything, with a rent that ate up almost his entire salary. Patricia, who was used to the comfort of a large house with a yard, a garden, and 3 bedrooms, fell into a depression. She started fighting with Michael every day, blaming him for the situation. "Your mother destroyed our life, and you let her—" Michael tried to contact me several times. He sent flowers, cards, messages. I received everything in silence, but I never responded. One day, I ran into Michael on the street by chance. He was even thinner, his face marked by suffering. "Mom, Patricia left me. She left and she took everything. I'm alone. No house, no family, no money. You were right about her." I looked at my son. The boy I raised who used to hug me, who promised to care for me forever. And I felt a pang in my heart, but it was too late. "Michael," I said calmly, "you kicked me out of my own house. You allowed your wife to humiliate me. You planned to put me in a home. Now you know what it feels like to be homeless. They wanted me to disappear. So that is exactly what I did." The first few days after moving into my new apartment were strange but liberating. Waking up without hearing screaming, eating breakfast whenever I wanted, watching TV, without anyone changing the channel, cooking only what I liked. The apartment was small compared to the house, but it was completely mine. No one gave me orders. No one criticized my food. No one treated me like a servant. For the first time in 3 years, I had peace. My sister Dolores came to visit, often worried about how I was adapting. "Don't you miss the big house, Grace?" she'd ask. "I miss the house," I'd reply. "But I don't miss being humiliated in it." During the first week, Michael called every day. He left crying messages, begging for forgiveness, pleading for me to come back. "Mom, I made a mistake. Patricia manipulated me. She blinded me. I didn't know what I was doing. Please forgive me." I listened to every message until the end, but I didn't return the calls. It wasn't that I couldn't forgive him. Mothers always forgive. But forgiving didn't mean going back to being a victim. Forgiving didn't mean forgetting the humiliation. Forgiving didn't mean agreeing to be trampled on again. Patricia lasted exactly 3 weeks in the rented apartment before she abandoned Michael. The woman who supposedly loved him so much, who had fought to control her house, who had manipulated every situation to get everything. She disappeared as soon as she realized there would be no big house, no comforts, no financial stability. She even took the appliances that Michael had bought with his own hard work. A neighbor told me she saw Patricia loading things into a truck while Michael was at work. When he returned, he found the apartment empty and a note. "This wasn't what I expected from life. I need a man who can give me real security." The irony was perfect. Patricia had destroyed the stable home that I had built for Michael, only to discover that without that stability, he was useless to her. She had killed the golden goose. Michael was left alone in a rented room, working 2 jobs to pay the debts Patricia had left behind. Credit cards, loans, installment purchases that he now had to pay for alone. The comfortable life he'd had for 28 years, thanks to my work and sacrifice, had disappeared forever. A month after I moved out, Michael showed up at my apartment unannounced. He was thinner than ever, with wrinkled clothes, unshaven. "Mom, I need to talk to you." I let him in, but I kept my distance. He sat in my small living room and began to cry like he did when he was a child. "Patricia left Mom. She left me with all the debts. She took everything she could carry. I lost the house. I lost my family. I lost everything. And the worst part is, now I understand that you were right from the beginning." I served him a coffee. My maternal instinct was hard to control, but I didn't comfort him like I used to. "Michael," I said, "for 3 years you allowed that woman to humiliate me in my own home. You never defended me. You never took my side. You never considered my feelings. You two planned to put me in a home as if I were crazy just to keep my house. And now that she's abandoned you, you come looking for the mother you disregarded." Michael lowered his head, ashamed. "I know I made terrible mistakes, Mom, but you're my mother, the only family I have left. Can't you forgive me?" I looked at him sadly. "I've already forgiven you, Michael, but forgiving doesn't mean going back. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiving doesn't mean I'm going to let you hurt me again." Michael tried to convince me for 2 hours. He reminded me of the good times from his childhood. He asked me to think about the grandchildren. He promised that everything would be different if I gave him another chance. "We can live together again, Mom. We'll find a new house. We'll start over. I've learned my lesson." But I had learned mine too. "Michael, son, you had 28 years to learn to value me. You had a whole life to understand what my sacrifice meant. You only realized it when you were left alone and with nothing. That isn't love, that's convenience." I explained how I had felt during those 3 terrible years. "Do you know what it's like to be humiliated by your own daughter-in-law in front of the whole family and have your son stay silent? Do you know what it's like to hear them planning to put you in a home like a crazy person? Do you know what it's like to become a servant in the house you built with your own sweat?" Michael cried as I spoke. "I didn't know you felt that bad, Mom. Patricia told me you were exaggerating, that it was normal for mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law to clash," I replied. "It wasn't clashing, Michael. It was systematic abuse, and you chose to believe her instead of believing me." When Michael left that afternoon, I knew it was the last time he would try to convince me to come back. In his eyes, I saw that he had finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost. He hadn't just lost a house and a wife. He had lost the unconditional love of the person who had loved him most in this world. He had traded the mother who gave her life for him for a woman who abandoned him at the first sign of trouble, and now he would have to live with that decision for the rest of his life. The following weeks were about adjustment and rediscovery. I learned to live alone after decades of living for others. I bought plants to decorate my small apartment. I signed up for a knitting class at the community center. I started reading novels I hadn't been able to read in years. Slowly, I began to rediscover who Grace Morgan was beyond being a mother and a mother-in-law. I was an intelligent, capable woman with my own tastes and firm opinions. My sister Dolores helped me a lot during that transition. "Grace," she told me, "for 50 years you lived for your husband and your son. It's time for you to live for yourself." She was right. I had forgotten that I had a right to be happy, a right to be respected, a right to make my own decisions. The money from the sale of the house plus the savings from the rent of the other apartment gave me financial security for the rest of my life. I no longer depended on anyone to survive. 3 months after moving out, I ran into Patricia at the supermarket. She was with an older, well-dressed man who clearly had money. She saw me and approached with a fake smile. "Mrs. Morgan, how are you? I've heard Michael is going through some hard times." I looked at her coldly. "Patricia, you were the one who destroyed my son. You were the one who ruined our family out of greed. I hope the gentleman you're with knows the kind of woman you are." Patricia turned red with embarrassment. Her new boyfriend looked at her with curiosity, clearly not knowing the whole story. I walked away without saying more. It wasn't worth wasting energy on someone who was already out of my life forever. 6 months after leaving the house, I received a call from Michael. His voice sounded more mature, more reflective. "Mom, I'm not calling to ask you to come back. I just want you to know that I understand why you left. I understand that what we did was wrong. I understand that you deserved respect and we didn't give it to you." I thanked him for acknowledging it, but I made it clear that apologies didn't change the past. "Michael, I'm glad you've reflected on it, but some decisions can't be undone. You chose Patricia over me, and now we both live with the consequences of that choice." The conversation was cordial but distant. Michael told me he had gotten a better job, that he was paying off his debts little by little, that he had learned to live alone and to value the simple things in life. The experience helped me grow, Mom, even though the price was very high. I wished him the best sincerely, but I also made it clear that our paths had separated forever. "I wish you happiness, Michael, but not from up close. I can't risk being hurt again." At the end of that call, I felt at peace with my decision. I had done the right thing by moving away. It wasn't revenge. It was emotional survival. It wasn't cruelty. It was dignity. I had learned that self-love was just as important as loving your children, and that no one had the right to trample on my value as a person. Not even my own son. Patricia had wanted to destroy me, but without knowing it, she had set me free. She had forced me to rediscover my strength, my worth, my ability to be happy on my own. A year later, Michael married a different woman, a humble and hard-working nurse named Rose, who met him at his lowest point and accepted him as he was. He didn't invite me to the wedding. He knew I wouldn't go, but my sister told me it had been a simple ceremony, no luxuries, but full of real love. I was happy for him truly. Everyone deserves a second chance at love, even those who have made terrible mistakes. But he would have to build that second chance without me. I had already closed that chapter of my life and started a new one where the protagonist was me, not my role as a mother or mother-in-law. The house where I lived for 45 years now shelters the young family that bought it. I pass by it sometimes and see the children playing in the garden I used to tend. I see the new owner hanging laundry in the same yard where I overheard Patricia's cruel plans. The house had become a home full of love and laughter again, something it had stopped being during the last 3 years I lived there. I was glad it had found a family that valued it and would care for it as it deserved. Patricia disappeared from our lives as suddenly as she had arrived. She married the older man I met at the supermarket, a rich widower who gave her the comfortable life she had always wanted. Michael told me he heard from mutual friends that Patricia had invented a whole story about being the victim of a crazy mother-in-law and an abusive husband. She had always been an expert at twisting the truth to her advantage, but she wasn't my problem anymore. She was out of my life forever. And with her, she had also taken the son I once knew. The Michael I had raised with so much love had died the day he allowed Patricia to humiliate me. The man that was left was a stranger who shared my blood, but not my values. I had tried to rescue that lost son, but I learned that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Sometimes the most painful lesson a mother must learn is when to let go, and let her children face the consequences of their decisions, even if those consequences destroy them. That night, a year after leaving the house, I sat on my small balcony and watched the sunset. I had my favorite coffee, my novel in my hands, and the silence I had craved for so long. There were no screams, no orders, no humiliations, just peace. I thought of Frank and mentally thanked him for leaving me the legal and financial tools to defend myself. I thought of my parents and thanked them for teaching me that respect is earned, but also demanded. And I thought of myself, of the strong woman I had rediscovered after years of being forgotten. The transformation was complete. The victim was dead, and in her place a free, dignified woman was born, finally in control of her own destiny. Patricia thought she would destroy me, but without knowing it, she had saved me. 2 years later, I wake up every morning in my small, quiet apartment. No yelling, no orders, no humiliation. I make my coffee the way I like it. I drink it at my own pace. I read the entire newspaper if I feel like it. The peace I found is priceless. Sometimes I see Michael passing by on the street where I live. He found out my address, but he never has the courage to come up. He just stands on the sidewalk, looks up at my window, stays there for a few minutes, and then leaves. Patricia really did abandon him when she found out there would be no big house, no yard, no comfort. She married another man in less than 6 months, someone with his own assets. Michael lives alone in a rented room, working 2 jobs to pay the bills. Sometimes I feel a pang of pity. In the end, he is still my son. But then I remember the humiliation I endured, the tears I cried, the plans to put me in a home, and the pain goes away. I have a simple routine now. I wake up, drink coffee, do some sewing for special clients, eat lunch watching my soap opera, and take a nap in the afternoon. 3 times a week, I go to the library where I joined a reading group for seniors. I met Linda Johnson, a widow like me, who also had problems with her daughter-in-law. We became friends. She told me something I will never forget. Grace, a mother's love that becomes slavery isn't love. It's an illness. You cured yourself. It's true. I spent 68 years of my life living for others, my husband, my son, my daughter-in-law. Now I finally live for me. When someone asks if I miss my family, I answer that a real family doesn't humiliate, doesn't despise, doesn't abandon. What I had wasn't a family. It was people taking advantage of my kindness. The transformation wasn't easy at first. For the first few months, I would wake up early out of habit, expecting to hear Patricia yelling for breakfast. It took me weeks to get used to eating when I wanted to watching TV without anyone changing the channel to cooking just for myself. I had forgotten what it was like to live without fear of being scolded, without anxiety about not doing things how others expected. Little by little, I rediscovered my own tastes. I like my coffee with little sugar. I prefer romance novels over the news. I enjoy cooking simple dishes without the pressure of pleasing anyone else. My apartment is small but cozy. I decorated every corner to my own taste without anyone criticizing that something looked ugly or outdated. I put the photos of Frank in the living room, my mother's mortar and pestle in the kitchen, the plants I always wanted, but Patricia said made a mess. Every object has a special place. Every piece of furniture was chosen by me, for me. It's the first time in decades I've lived in a space that truly belongs to me, where no one can tell me what to do or how to live. Linda became an invaluable friend during this transition. Her story was similar to mine. A son manipulated by a controlling wife, years of silent humiliation, until one day she decided to leave and never look back. I felt guilty at first, she told me during one of our coffee afternoons. I thought it was my duty to put up with everything because I was a mother. But then I understood that sacrifice has limits, that self-love matters too. Her words helped me process my own feelings, to understand that I wasn't a bad mother for setting boundaries, that I was a brave woman for choosing my dignity. Sundays are my favorite days. They used to be days of stress. Preparing huge meals, cleaning the whole house, enduring Patricia's criticisms, watching Michael ignore me. Now Sundays are for me. I go to church early, then walk in the park, buy fresh flowers for my apartment, and read under the shade of a tree. Sometimes Linda and I go to the movies or visit the craft market. They are Sundays full of small pleasures, no drama, no tension, no pleasing anyone but myself. Yesterday, Michael tried to call me again. He left a crying message begging for forgiveness, saying he understands everything that Patricia manipulated him, that he wants me back in his life. I listened to the whole message and then deleted it. It's not that I don't forgive him. Mothers always forgive. But forgiving doesn't mean going back. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiving doesn't mean accepting humiliation again. Michael had his chance to choose between his mother and his wife. He chose. Now he lives with that decision. I closed the drawer where I keep the old photos. I smiled at myself in the mirror and went out for my afternoon walk. On the street, a neighbor greeted me. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Morgan. How are you?" I answered with a genuine smile. I am free. The emotional healing process took time. For months I had nightmares where Patricia screamed at me, where Michael ignored me, where I was back to being the humiliated woman I was for 3 years. Waking up from those nightmares and remembering I was safe in my own space was an indescribable relief. Gradually, the nightmares faded until they disappeared completely. In their place, peaceful dreams came. Dreams where I was walking through gardens full of flowers, where Frank hugged me and told me he was proud of my courage. I learned to fill my days with activities that gave me pleasure. I signed up for embroidery classes at the community center, where I met other women my age with similar stories. I discovered I wasn't the only one who had suffered abuse from a controlling daughter-in-law. I wasn't the only one who had been ignored by ungrateful children. Hearing these stories helped me understand that my experience was more common than I thought, but also that my decision to leave had been braver than many others who stayed and endured for the good of the family. In embroidery class, I met Ruth, a 75-year-old woman whose daughter-in-law had kicked her out of the house after her husband died. She told me I had no reason to be there anymore, that I was in the way of her marriage. She told me while we embroidered flowers on a tablecloth. I went to live with my sister, and it was the best decision of my life. I discovered I could be happy without depending on ungrateful kids. Her strength inspired me to keep going in the difficult moments when the loneliness felt heavy, and I missed having family close. I also met Lucy Helen, whose story had a different ending. Her daughter-in-law had also tried to control her house and her relationship with her son. But when she set firm boundaries from the beginning, her son defended her, and the daughter-in-law had to adapt. The key, she explained, was to never allow the first act of disrespect. As soon as my daughter-in-law tried to disrespect me, I spoke to my son and made it clear I would not tolerate it. He chose to defend me, and his wife understood she couldn't mess with me. Her story made me reflect on how things could have been different if I had set boundaries earlier, but it also confirmed that Michael had made his choice consciously. On weekends, I like to walk through the historic downtown area. I see young couples walking hand-in-hand, families with children running in the squares, grandparents playing with their grandchildren. Sometimes I feel a pang of melancholy, thinking of the grandchildren I no longer see, the family celebrations I'm no longer part of. But then I remember the price I had to pay for those things, The constant humiliation, the disrespect, the loss of my dignity, and the melancholy turns into relief. I would rather be alone with respect than accompanied by contempt. My sister Dolores comes to visit me every 2 weeks. At first, she was worried about my decision. She thought it was too drastic, that I should give Michael another chance. He's your only son, Grace. Family is the most important thing. But over time, she has seen how I have blossomed in my new life, how I've regained the joy I had lost, how I no longer live with that constant tension that defined me during the years with Patricia. "You look younger," she told me. "You've shed years of stress." Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty for taking the house from Michael. The answer is simple. I didn't take anything that was his. The house was mine. I paid for it. I maintained it. I had every legal and moral right to do what I wanted with it. Michael lived there out of my generosity, not his own right. When that generosity was met with abuse, I had every right to withdraw it. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. It wasn't cruelty. It was self-defense. Any mother who watched her son allow her to be humiliated would do the same if she had the means to do it. The money from the sale of the house, plus the savings from the apartment Frank left me, gave me financial security for the rest of my life. I don't depend on anyone to survive. I don't have to put up with mistreatment out of necessity. I don't have to stay quiet for fear of being left homeless. This financial independence was key to my emotional liberation. Without it, I might have endured many more years of humiliation because I would have had no alternative. Frank, without knowing it, gave me the tools to defend myself decades after his death. News of Patricia has reached me through mutual acquaintances. She married the older man I met at the supermarket, a rich widower who gives her the luxurious life she always wanted. They live in a mansion on the outskirts of the city. They travel constantly. She wears expensive jewelry and designer clothes. She got exactly what she wanted, a man to support her, so she doesn't have to work. The difference is, this husband has no children who can interfere with her plans. He has no mother-in-law to defend. He has no family history to respect. Patricia can be the queen of her castle with no competition. I don't feel resentment toward her. On the contrary, I'm almost grateful to her for showing me who my son really was. If it hadn't been for her cruelty, I might have spent the rest of my life being the self-sacrificing mother who suffers in silence. Patricia forced me to find my strength to rediscover my worth, to defend my dignity. Without knowing it, she was the catalyst for my liberation. Her evil became my blessing. As for Michael, I know he is still struggling financially. After Patricia left him with all the debts, he had to work 2 jobs to get by. His new job as a construction supervisor pays better, but the accumulated debts will keep him paying for years. He got married 6 months ago to a nurse named Rose, a simple, hard-working woman who met him at his lowest point. My sister went to the wedding, a small ceremony at the courthouse, and told me Michael looked good, more mature, more humble. "He asked about you," Dolores told me. "He said he hoped you were okay, and that one day you could forgive him." I replied that I had already forgiven him, but that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Rose seems to be a completely different woman from Patricia. She comes from a humble family like ours. She works for a living. She doesn't seek luxuries or comforts she can't afford. According to my sister, she treats Michael with kindness, but also with firmness. She doesn't let him play the victim or blame others for his problems. It's what he needed, Dolores says. A woman who truly loves him, not just what he can give her. I am genuinely happy that Michael has found an authentic love, but he will have to build that happiness without me. I have already closed that chapter of my life. The grandchildren grew up without really knowing their grandmother. I see them occasionally when they go shopping with Rose near my house. They are polite, well-behaved children, clearly being raised with love and discipline. Sometimes they recognize me and wave shyly, but that special connection we used to have isn't there. Patricia made sure to keep them away from me during their most important developmental years, and now we are practically strangers. I don't blame them. They were too young to understand the situation, but losing them was one of the most painful consequences of my decision. Still, I don't regret it. Grandchildren raised in an environment where their grandmother was humiliated would have learned that such disrespect was normal. My leaving also protected them from growing up thinking that mistreating elders was acceptable. Maybe one day when they are adults and understand the situation better, they will seek out the truth about what really happened. Maybe Michael will tell them how his decisions destroyed the family. Or maybe they'll never know the whole story. In any case, it's no longer my responsibility. The afternoons are my favorite time of day. I sit on my small balcony with a cup of tea and watch the sunset paint the sky with beautiful colors. There is no rush. There is no pressure. There is no one demanding I do anything. It's a luxury I haven't had in decades. Time to think, to reflect, to simply exist. In those moments of silence, I sometimes speak to Frank in my mind. I tell him about my new life. I thank him for being a man who respected and valued me during our marriage. Frank, I say to the sky, it took me a long time to understand your last piece of advice, but I finally followed it. I am no longer a victim of my own kindness. I found the strength you always knew I had. I feel he would be proud to see how I handled the situation, how I defended my dignity, how I built a new life at 68 years old. It wasn't easy to start over at this age, but it was necessary. It was the only way to get back my self-esteem and my inner peace. Last night, I had a beautiful dream. I was in a garden full of flowers, walking peacefully under a gentle sun. Frank was there, young and smiling like when we got married. "Are you happy, Grace?" he asked. "I am free," I replied. And for the first time in years, that is the same as being happy. He hugged me and said, "Then all the pain was worth it." I woke up with a feeling of total peace, knowing I had made the right decisions. This morning, while I was drinking my coffee and watching the news, I heard a segment about domestic abuse against the elderly. The reporter interviewed a psychologist who explained how often the abuse comes from family members themselves, how children or in-laws can be abusive to elderly parents. How many victims don't report it out of shame or fear of being left alone? I recognized myself in that description, and I felt proud that I had been brave enough to break the cycle of abuse before it was too late. The sun is coming through my window, lighting up my small living room, where I have my favorite books, my well-cared-for plants, my sewing corner organized exactly as I like it. This space is completely mine, designed by me and for me. No one can come in here to yell, to demand, to humiliate. It is my refuge, my sanctuary, my true home. At 68, I learned that family isn't always made of blood, that home isn't always where you were born, that happiness sometimes requires walking away from those you love most. Today is Sunday again. It has been exactly 2 years since Patricia humiliated me at that table. 2 years since I made the decision to change my life forever. I'm going to celebrate this anniversary of my liberation by going to church, buying fresh flowers, and cooking my favorite meal just for myself. I no longer cook to please others. I no longer serve those who don't value me. I no longer accept scraps of affection from those who should love me unconditionally. Sometimes the greatest new beginning is the silence one chooses to keep. We are curious to know how this story ended. Where are you watching us from? Comment below.